صلى على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. With apologies for the day, inshallah, we will begin with the recitation of the Holy Quran. Please welcome Sister Khadija with another salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas, malikin nas, ilahin nas, min sharri waswasil khannas, alladhi yuwaswisu fi sudurin nas, minal jannati wan nas.
Okay.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Inshallah, we will proceed with the lecture by respected guest scholar, Sheikh Mahdi. Please welcome him with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة على رسول الله وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه المنتجبين سيما بقية الله في الأرضين عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I begin again by expressing my condolences on the anniversary of the martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam, that last night we commemorated the martyrdom anniversary. Inshallah, the Imam of our time accept our condolences and that of Ahlul Bayt, and may we be of the true followers of the Imam alayhi salam and that of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. So we'll continue, inshallah, our study of letter 31 from Nahjul Balagha, where Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam is admonishing his son, and all of us really, as a father admonishes his child, and we're reading this document from that perspective of parents that are trying to learn and then hopefully incorporate admonitions and regimens, roadmaps for raising our children, but also to create for them not just documents that we share our admonitions, but hopefully that we are in negotiating our relationships with them, applying these things day after day. So we arrived at this point that the Imam instructed his son, again, giving personal instructions on how he should care for the heart, enliven the heart with admonition, kill it with zuhd, with the kind of turning away from an attachment, an excessive attachment to the world, fortify it with certainty, enlighten it with wisdom, and tame it with the remembrance of death. And the Imam spoke about how expose it to the calamities of the world, go study, read, and then see the outcomes of those people who were before you, how they lived their lives, how they departed, how they had to struggle in life, and how you will be joining them soon. So prepare yourself for those realities of life. And we made some suggestions on practical programs and strategies that we can employ in trying to better educate our children and for us to help them make positive life choices. Imam then shifts gears again and gives some relationship advice. Not relationship in the form of a spouse or the form of a sibling, but when you're trying to engage with societal discourse, when you're engaging with other people and you're hearing opinions and you want to share opinions, keep these two principles close to you. Number one, Imam says, وَدَعِ الْقَوْلَ فِيمَا لَا تَعْرِفْ وَالْخِطَابَ فِيمَا لَمْ تُكَلَّفْ. Leave off speaking about those things that you don't know. La ta'rif means either you don't have an expertise or you don't have sufficient knowledge to form an opinion that is informed by some sort of research that has been vetted through reputable sources. And the second is, and kind of don't task yourself with having to speak about things that you have not been charged with. Charged with, that means you are not responsible for. Something is not being asked of you. Let's break this down a little bit, these two things. So, of course, there's a lot in the Islamic teaching that speaks about correct etiquette when it comes to speaking. I don't want to survey all of that. But one of the things the Quran tells us, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. Don't pursue something that you are not sure about, you don't fully understand. See, when we speak about things that we don't fully understand, we put ourselves in a position of not just being mistaken, but of potentially, creating problems, misunderstanding, and these things lead to further issues. Sometimes it leads to fractured relationships. Sometimes it leads to misguided action. So the Imam says, be careful, because there's a responsibility that the tongue holds. Both of these ideas, I think we can find a connection to a very popular psychological study and phenomena known as the Dunning-Kruger Effect. So just a brief kind of introduction of what this is. In the mid-90s, there was a kind of an extraordinary event, a crime that occurred, where a man in Pittsburgh robbed a bank with no mask or anything to kind of conceal his identity. So he was almost immediately apprehended. And as they were questioning him after he was arrested, trying to figure out why the person is doing what they did, and, didn't they think that they would be caught? This criminal explained the logic of why he felt he didn't need to conceal his face by saying, but I put lemon juice on my face. So what this person had understood was that just like a person can use, lemon juice to write something and conceal that writing on a piece of paper, his kind of creativity or ingenuity was to equate being able to conceal one's face and identity from the cameras if they were to apply lemon juice on their face. This kind of brought about the study within social psychology of how people gauge their own competence and the result of their actual kind of like their competence and the aptitude that they have. And what researchers noticed, and these two researchers, David Dunning and his associate Justin Kruger, they found that the study was the participants were asked to estimate their level of competence in a few different fields like logic, grammar, logical reasoning, humor. And there were a few subjected tests that they were subjected to actually assess their competence. What they found was the greater the incompetence of the individual, the less the person is aware. That means, for the most part, this study concluded that incompetent people in certain areas of knowledge first can't detect and recognize their incompetence, and number two, usually don't recognize the competence of other people. So why am I sharing this? Because I think this is really important for us to always kind of be aware of this. When the Imam is saying, leave off speaking that which you don't know. No, there's certain things that we know for sure we don't know. We call that a kind of a plain or single ignorance. I know that I'm not informed about this subject, so I probably am not going to have an opinion, and I'm not going to speak on it. If someone asks me, I'm probably going to say, I don't know, I don't have an opinion. And also the thing that we're not charged with. We are not responsible to respond or to engage in a certain affair, a certain idea, a certain concept. When we begin to kind of misjudge our competencies, that's when we run into problems. So let me give you a few examples of what this looks like. The Imam says, leave what you don't know. Someone shares a story, a report, an event about another person in the community that you heard. You're hearing it from someone else. Now, you know, of course, that you can't relay something about another person that first you're not sure, right? The Quran says, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. Something that you don't have knowledge, certainty, assurance of, don't pursue it. Don't speak on it. So you already know you're not supposed to do that. And you know already that you're not supposed to do ghaiba of anyone. You're not supposed to backbite. And you're not supposed to engage in calumny, tuhma, making up lies about people and attributing it to them. We already know all of these things. Now, in the event that I allow myself to relay that information, what is that saying? It's saying that I have a confidence in the fact what I heard is correct, and what I'm relaying does not satisfy ghaiba, nor tuhma, nor any other thing that is objectionable Islamically and ethically. So we have a serious problem in this day and age with the kind of like the availability of, or the overwhelming amount of information that's just available to us, that entices us to speak on things that we don't fully understand or we haven't fully verified yet. I heard that so-and-so said this. I heard that so-and-so is doing this. I heard that so-and-so's child is this, this, and that. Have you followed up, first of all, to ensure that that's correct? Or do you trust in the fact that any news that you receive has to be correct? Has it gone through your internal logical system and you've concluded that this is verified information and it can be passed on to the next person? In many cases, one would argue that that's not true. And what we're doing is we're perpetuating something that is suspicious or is questionable. And if we do that confidently, then it's possible we kind of are examples and instances of this Dunning-Kruger effect. Because we think we have more competence, we have more confidence in what we're doing, even though the data shows that we don't. So that's one thing to be really careful about. If you're going to speak, speak on something that you know. And if you don't know, this is how Ahlul Bayt are teaching us. Don't be ashamed to, number one, verbalize the fact that you don't know, or at least don't put yourself in a position that you have to speak or that you are asked to speak. Conceal your ignorance. Right? There are famous proverbs and maxims that I'm just paraphrasing here because they come in different forms. So it's better to conceal your ignorance through silence than to expose it through your speech. So learning that skill of saying I don't know is a really powerful thing. Why? Not just because we are humiliating ourselves in front of other people. That's not the point. But it's an acknowledgement that there are first limitations to the things that we know. And if we're interested in them and we're charged with doing something with it, then we go learn it correctly through the correct channels in the appropriate manner. And then we form an opinion. And then based on that opinion, we act on it. And if it's not our concern, then we abandon it because it's not worth our time. So that's the first thing. If you don't know something, one of the example of great ulama, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's Sheikh Ansari. Can I mention the example of Sheikh Ansari last night? Sheikh Ansari is top scholar, elite. It was customary for him that when people would ask him questions and he didn't know, he would loudly say in class, "Agha, nemi dunam." Loud, kind of drawing attention to himself. He wouldn't whisper and say, "Oh, I don't know the answer to this question. Don't embarrass me. I'll find it and get back to you." No. Very loudly. "I don't know." So all the students would look, "Oh my God, this great teacher. He's saying, I don't know. What's the question?" But he also did that to ensure that he remained humble and that his nafs, his ego didn't, he didn't allow it to take over him. So that's number one. I just wanted to say that practicing the quality of saying explicitly or implicitly, "I don't know." There is nothing wrong with that. It's attributed to Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam. Half of knowledge, half of learning is just that acknowledgement that I don't know something. We are not like Nabi Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, that Allah says, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. Allah taught us all of the names. We're not like that. We're people, we're learning, we know some things, we don't know some things, we've learned some things, we haven't learned some things, we've learned some things, we've forgotten many things. Okay. Other rawayat we have from Ahlul Bayt, a person is better off, I'm paraphrasing, a person is better off enduring the embarrassment, if you want to call it, the shame, if you want to call it, of a moment by acknowledging that they don't know and then learning it correctly, than a lifetime of embarrassment that a person conceals that and kind of tries to save face through that ignorance. So the things that you don't know, don't speak on them because they have repercussions. In religious issues specifically, say if a person speaks on a religious issue and they later find that they were mistaken, they are responsible to correct it with the person that they have, they were speaking to previously, within reason, but they're responsible for it. So any action that is performed as a result of this misinformation, the source of the misinformation is responsible to. That's how serious it is. So obviously we want to be a little bit more composed when we speak. All right, let's move on to the second part, which is also incredibly important. And with which you have not been charged, leave that speech to. In riwayat we have this. Al-Bayt say that if we want to create a well-balanced, well-ordered society, community, any sort of group and collective, people who have the qualifications and competencies need to occupy the right positions. Right? So sometimes ourselves or others want to contribute to a project, to an endeavor. We may not be the best fit, but just by given the fact that there's no one else, we fill the role, hopefully until someone more qualified comes along, or we can advance ourselves and kind of meet those qualifications. Sometimes we get in over our heads just because we want to do something nice, kind of get into a position that we don't fully know what we're doing. That can be dangerous. And the worst of that is when you have positions that are so central to the success of the community that one, either they are occupied by people who are not a good fit, or they have some other self-promoting agenda, or God forbid, you have positions that need to be filled that are not being filled at all, that are just being completely neglected. And in one way or another, you have your adversaries or your enemies filling those roles to your detriment. Let me give you an example. What I'm trying to say about this. Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, in the letter that he writes to Malik Ashtar in Nahj al-Balagha, right? This is the epitome of governance. The Imam is giving him those instructions. So when it comes to the judiciary, the Imam gives clear instruction. I just want to read a few of these passages about putting competent people in the right places. The Imam says, beware. The utmost carefulness is to be exercised in its selection, speaking of the judiciary. For it is this high office which adventurous self-seekers aspire to secure and exploit in their selfish interests. After the selection of your chief judge, give careful consideration to the selection of other officers. Confirm them in their appointments after apprenticeship and probation. Never select men for responsible posts either out of regard for personal connections or under any influence, for that might lead to injustice and corruption. Of these, select for higher posts men of experience, men firm in faith, and belonging to good families. Such men will not fall an easy prey to temptations and will discharge their duties with an eye on the abiding good of others. Increase their salaries to give them a contented life. For a contented life is a help to self-purification. So just this one excerpt, even if we're not talking about large governmental structures, okay, let's put that aside, bracket that. I'm not a member of office anywhere, and I would just take for granted that none of you are either. But you are all members of smaller collectives, like your community, maybe a school, maybe a nonprofit, another cultural organization, whatever. The Imam is saying people who are supposed to fit these roles, especially when it comes to the advancement of certain programs, caring for the youth we've been speaking about, put people here who are carefully selected. Be careful, because in a vacuum, people can come and occupy those positions to serve their own personal interests. It's dangerous already. It's serving their ego. The person wants to become a leader because it pads their ego. It makes them feel good. It's dangerous. But also make sure that they undergo this apprenticeship, to have a period of probation. Make sure none of this kind of personal connection and nepotism and partibazi, as we call, none of this stuff should play any role in the selection of people. You're supposed to choose the people who are most qualified. So when I read this, I always think about, okay, positions like within the community, right? The community, you would hope, has a vision, is advancing to some end. And with regard to, child rearing, they say it takes a village to raise a child. But what is the vision there? There has to obviously be a vision. Then that vision is rendered into an actual program. What is that program? Who are its officers? What are the different roles that need to be played? And then how are we going to go about selecting the people, number one, who are good fits, but also supporting them to ensure that they develop, maintain, and expand on their qualifications. For some communities, that thought already is going over their head, because there's no branch of a vision for a youth roadmap. It's just, we have a few roles at the masjid. One person opens the door and closes the door. One person makes the tea. One person leads the prayer if there's not an imam. The other one reads the dua and the Quran. And because there's only a few roles, then there's only so much people can do. And it's sometimes it's very unfortunate and comical. You see the conflicts, the politics that are related to only these few roles. But something much larger, like planning for, like community planning, which is a field of study, by the way. You can get certificates, you can get degrees. So who are the people who are being selected? How are we selecting it? And how are we encouraging a younger generation, the next generation, to acknowledge those and then kind of prepare themselves for qualifications that they can fill these positions? So the Imam is already saying, don't speak on things that you're not charged with. There are plenty of things that we are charged with. Someone needs to speak on them. Someone needs to act on them. I think what's really important for us to do is to map those out first, to see how much work we really have to do. And it requires people who are visionaries, who are able to apply their skills in life, their ingenuity, their management abilities. All of those come together, and then obviously expertise when it comes to child development, when it comes to education, when it comes to moral upbringing, all of those things come together and build something, and then ensure that the right people fill those positions. So, I can't speak. There's so much to say just about these two things when it comes to raising children, when it comes to building an institution that serves the needs of the younger generation or the next generations. So I'll stop there because I know we've gone over time. Inshallah, tomorrow we'll continue. Just from this point, I apologize. I was hoping we'd get through a paragraph, not one sentence. But, we're hoping that we can, with a little bit more attention and detail, study this letter so that as we're going through it, or when we finish it, whenever that may be, that we have something to work with, and we can return to this over and over and over again to see how our understandings, how they actually hold up to what the Imam is instructing us to do. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the right of Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wasalam, that we are students of his in the presence of this letter and in the anniversary of commemorating his martyrdom, that we heed his advice, that we receive these admonitions, these maw'idas, and we act upon them, not just for the good of ourselves, for the good of our children, but also the good of our community as a whole, because we care for each other and we care for the well-being and the success of each other and our families. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the right of these nights, to protect our families, to bring togetherness, to bring understanding, to bring love, and to bring a commitment to serve his cause, and for us to all be focused on lending support to the cause of the Imam of our time. May Allah hasten his reappearance. Wassalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Lion of Allah, Ali Asadullah, he's the proof of Allah, Ali Hujjatullah, Ya Ali, 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 Ali light of Allah, Ali door of Allah, Ali, friend of Allah, Ali, wali Allah. Ya Ali, 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 Ya Ali. Born inside the Kaaba, the town of Mecca, Ali was martyred in the Masjid of Kufa. Ya Ali, 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 Ya Ali. Father of the orphans, he was our Haidar, strongest man in the battlefield, fighting for the rightful rights of Islam. Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ali. Lion of Allah, Ali Asadullah, he's the proof of Allah. Ali Hajatullah, Ya Ali, 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 Ya Ali. Ali light of Allah, Ali door of Allah, Ali friend of Allah, Ali wali Allah. Ya Ali, 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 Ya Ali. Born inside the Kaaba in the town of Mecca, Ali was martyred in the Masjid of Kufa. Ya Ali, 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 Ya Ali. Father of the orphans, he was our Haidar, strongest man in the battlefield, fighting for the rightful rights of Islam. Ya Ali, 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 Ya Ali. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللہم لن قتلت الامیر المومنین. یہ جنازہ ہے علی کا شاہ خیبر گیر کا، یہ جنازہ ہے علی کا، یہ جنازہ ہے علی کا شاہ خیبر گیر کا، یہ جنازہ ہے علی کا. آج بابا مر گیا ہے شبر و شبیر کا، یہ جنازہ ہے علی کا. فاطمہ زہرا کے مرقد سے صدا آنے لگی، فاطمہ زہرا کے مرقد سے صدا آنے لگی، ہائے صدا آنے لگی. یہ مصائب رہ گیا تھا کیا میری تقدیر کا، یہ جنازہ ہے علی کا، یہ جنازہ ہے علی کا شاہ خیبر گیر کا، یہ جنازہ ہے علی کا. یا رسول اللہ یہ جبریل نے رو کر کہا، یا رسول اللہ یہ جبریل نے رو کر کہا، ہائے یہ رو کر کہا. ایک حلقہ اور ٹوٹا نور کی زنجیر کا، یہ جنازہ ہے علی کا، یہ جنازہ ہے علی کا شاہ خیبر گیر کا، یہ جنازہ ہے علی کا. کیوں چلائی تیغ حیدر پر بن ملجم بتا، क्यों चलाई तेग हैदर पर बिने मुलजिम बता, हाय बिने मुलजिम बता। कत्ल कुरआन कर दिया काटा गला तफसीर का, ये जनाजा है अली का, ये जनाजा है अली का, शाह खैबर गिर का, ये जनाजा है अली का। गम अली की बेटियों के फिर से ताजा हो गए, गम अली की बेटियों के फिर से ताजा हो गए, हाय ताजा हो गए। गम अभी भूली कहाँ थी मादरे दिलगीर का, ये जनाजा है अली का, ये जनाजा है अली का, शाह खैबर गिर का, ये जनाजा है अली का। आज बाबा मर गया है शबरो शबीर का, ये जनाजा है अली का।
الرحيم اللهم إني أفتتح الثناء بحمدك وأنت مسدد للصواب بمنك، وأيقنت أنك أنت أرحم الراحمين في موضع العفو والرحمة، وأشد المعاقبين في موضع النكال والنقمة، وأعظم المتجبرين في موضع الكبرياء والعظمة. اللهم أذنت لي في دعائك ومسألتك، فاسمع يا سميع مدحتي، وأجب يا رحيم دعوتي، وأقل يا غفور عثرتي. فكم يا إلهي من كربة قد فرجتها، وهموم قد كشفتها، وعثرة قد أقلتها، ورحمة قد نشرتها، وحلقة بلاء قد فككتها. الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا، ولم يكن له شريك في الملك، ولم يكن له ولي من الذل، وكبره تكبيرا. الحمد لله بجميع محامده كلها، على جميع نعمه كلها. الحمد لله الذي لا مضاد له في ملكه، ولا منازع له في أمره. الحمد لله الذي لا شريك له في خلقه، ولا شبيه له في عظمته. الحمد لله الفاشي في الخلق أمره وحمده، الظاهر بالكرم مجده، الباسط بالجود يداه الذي لا تنقص خزائنه ولا تزيده كثرة العطاء إلا جودا وكرما إنه هو العزيز الوهاب. اللهم إني أسألك قليلا من كثير مع حاجة بي إليه عظيمة وغناك عنه قديم وهو عندي كثير وهو عليك سهل يسير. اللهم إن عفوك عن ذنبي وتجاوزك عن خطيئتي وصفحك عن ظلمي وسترك على قبيح عملي وحلمك عن كثير جرمي عندما كان من خطئي وعمدي أطمعني في أن أسألك ما لا أستوجبه منك الذي رزقتني من رحمتك وأريتني من قدرتك وعرفتني من إجابتك فصرت أدعوك آمنا وأسألك مستأنسا لا خائفا ولا وجلا مدلا عليك فيما قصدت فيه إليك. فإن أبطأ عني عتبت بجهلي عليك ولعل الذي أبطأ عني هو خير لي لعلمك بعاقبة الأمور فلم أر مولا كريما أصبر على عبد لئيم منك علي يا رب. إنك تدعوني فأولي عنك وتتحبب إلي فأتبغض إليك وتتودد إلي فلا أقبل منك كأن لي التطول عليك فلم يمنعك ذلك من الرحمة لي والإحسان إلي والتفضل علي بجودك وكرمك. فارحم عبدك الجاهل وجد عليه بفضل إحسانك إنك جواد كريم. الحمد لله مالك الملك مجري الفلك مسخر الرياح فالق الإصباح ديان الدين رب العالمين. الحمد لله على حلمه بعد علمه والحمد لله على عفوه بعد قدرته والحمد لله على طول أناته في غضبه وهو قادر على ما يريد. الحمد لله خالق الخلق باسط الرزق فالق الإصباح ذي الجلال والإكرام والفضل والإنعام الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى تبارك وتعالى. الحمد لله الذي ليس له منازع يعادله ولا شبيه يشاكله ولا ظهير يعاضده. قهر بعزته الأعزاء وتواضع لعظمته العظماء فبلغ بقدرته ما يشاء الحمد لله الذي يجيبني حين أناديه ويستر علي كل عورة وأنا أعصيه ويعظم النعمة علي فلا أجازي. فكم من موهبة هنيئة قد أعطاني وعظيمة مخوفة قد كفاني وبهجة مونقة قد أراني. فأثني عليه حامدا وأذكره مسبحا. الحمد لله الذي لا يهتك حجابه ولا يغلق بابه ولا يرد سائله ولا يخيب آمله. الحمد لله الذي يؤمن الخائفين وينجي الصالحين ويرفع المستضعفين ويضع المستكبرين ويهلك ملوكا ويستخلف آخرين. والحمد لله قاصم الجبارين مبير الظالمين مدرك الهاربين نكال الظالمين صريخ المستصرخين موضع حاجات الطالبين معتمد المؤمنين. الحمد لله الذي من خشيته ترعد السماء وسكانها وترجف الأرض وعمارها وتموج البحار ومن يسبح في غمراتها. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. الحمد لله الذي يخلق ولم يخلق ويرزق ولا يرزق ويطعم ولا يطعم ويميت الأحياء ويحيي الموتى وهو حي لا يموت بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وأمينك وصفيك وحبيبك وخيرتك من خلقك وحافظ سرك ومبلغ رسالاتك أفضل وأحسن وأجمل وأكمل وأزكى وأنمى وأطيب وأطهر وأسنى وأكثر ما صليت وباركت وترحمت وتحننت وسلمت على أحد من عبادك وأنبيائك ورسلك وصفوتك وأهل الكرامة عليك من خلقك. اللهم وصل على علي أمير المؤمنين ووصي رسول رب العالمين عبدك ووليك وأخي رسولك وحجتك على خلقك وآيتك الكبرى والنبأ العظيم. وصل على الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين. وصل على صبطي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. وصل على أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي حججك على عبادك وأمنائك في بلادك صلاة كثيرة دائمة. اللهم وصل على ولي أمرك القائم المؤمل والعدل المنتظر وحفه بملائكتك المقربين وأيده بروح القدس يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعله الداعي إلى كتابك والقائم بدينك استخلفه في الأرض كما استخلفت الذين من قبله. مكن له دينه الذي ارتضيته له أبدله من بعد خوفه أمنا يعبدك لا يشرك بك شيئا. اللهم أعزه وأعزز به وانصره وانتصر به وانصره نصرا عزيزا وافتح له فتحا يسيرا واجعل له من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا. اللهم أظهر به دينك وسنة نبيك حتى لا يستخفي بشيء من الحق مخافة أحد من الخلق. اللهم إنا نرغب إليك في دولة كريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله وتذل بها النفاق وأهله وتجعلنا فيها من الدعاة إلى طاعتك والقادة إلى سبيلك وترزقنا بها كرامة الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم ما عرفتنا من الحق فحملناه وما قصرنا عنه فبلغناه. اللهم المم به شعثنا واشعب به صدعنا وارتق به فتقنا وكثر به قلتنا وأعزز به ذلتنا وأغن به عائلنا واقض به عن مغرمنا واجبر به فقرنا وسد به خلتنا ويسر به عسرنا وبيض به وجوهنا وفك به أسرنا وأنجح به طلبتنا وأنجز به مواعيدنا واستجب به دعوتنا وأعطنا به سؤلنا وبلغنا به من الدنيا والآخرة آمالنا وأعطنا به فوق رغبتنا يا خير المسؤولين وأوسع المعطين. اشف به صدورنا وأذهب به غيظ قلوبنا واهدنا به لما اختلف فيه من الحق بإذنك إنك تهدي من تشاء إلى صراط مستقيم. وانصرنا به على عدوك وعدونا إله الحق آمين. اللهم إنا نشكو إليك فقد نبينا صلواتك عليه وآله وغيبة ولينا وكثرة عدونا وقلة عددنا وشدة الفتن بنا وتظاهر الزمان علينا فصل على محمد وآله وأعنا على ذلك بفتح منك تعجله وبضر تكشفه ونصر تعزه وسلطان حق تظهره ورحمة منك تجللنا وعافية منك تلبسنا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. صل على محمد وآله الطاهرين.